They crushed his nuts in Casino Royale. Why does this one feel like it's crushing my nuts? I'm Seth, and it's day 32 of 365, reviewing every movie I've seen in theaters with the stubs to prove it. Today's movie, Quantum of Solace. Directed by Mark Forrester, and probably the least of the Daniel Craig Bond movies. I'm heading to South Korea next week, so if you want to support this adventure internationally, head over to my Patreon. I'm giving away these ticket stubs along the way. This one picks up right after Casino Royale, but loses all of the heart and momentum from that movie. The villain, forgettable. The action, somewhere between locked off tripods and Bourne shaky cam. Bond is supposed to be grieving, but Craig isn't given a lot of space to show that, so it just feels flat. It's not as bad as Eagle Eye like we talked about yesterday, but it's definitely not as good as Burn After Reading that we talked about 2 days ago. This one used to be one of the more skippable ones, and I say that knowing that Moonraker used to be the one to make jokes about, and it ended up being an in-real-life plot. I finished up the review for Eagle Eye, decided to go lay down, and then I figured while I'm laying down, I might as well watch Quantum of Solace. While watching Quantum of Solace, I figured I might as well do the review tonight. So sorry for wearing the same t-shirt twice in a row, but I want to knock a couple of these out before I head out for South Korea. This is another one that I'll keep kind of short because I do go into my problems with this movie at length over on the Film Rescue Show. I think we ended up talking about 2 or 3 of the Daniel Craig Bond movies over there. Some of them I like more than others. This is one that I really want to like. There's a lot of things in here that I should be able to like, but it ends up kind of leaving me flat. Let's keep this one brief and not too mean, Seth. A lot of the stuff I end up liking has a lot more to do with the ideas that they wanted to play with more than the execution of those ideas. Bond is very clearly trying to get over the death of a loved one. This is something that's new for the Bond series, in that they're actually willing to fixate on a specific character and not make him a blasé-faire moving on after this woman. I like that. It gives some real weight to Casino Royale. We also open with a kind of like parkour-esque sequence after a shootout and a chase. This kind of drops us right into the action. We don't know exactly where we are for the first, I think, 15 or 20 minutes of the movie, really, before it starts to lock in what we're kind of going after. And like, hey, yeah, if we want to do a Bond revenge flick, I'm here for that. This one still feels the need to have all the trappings of the world is at stake, and I don't know why they couldn't have just done a smaller Bond movie. I think this ends up leaving the overall plot kind of flat. We don't really care what the villain is doing, and what he's doing is so much bigger than why Bond is here, which is to interfere with this relationship he has with a woman. And so to not lessen the impact of that death, the movie goes out of its way to be like, oh, Bond and Camille are not going to get together, which is a breath of fresh air for the Bond series. It's just too bad it happens in such a boring movie. When we have other Bond movies about billionaires being secret Nazis wanting to go to space, and that ends up being closer to real-life supervillains, this movie really kind of peters out and ends up being like, what if James Bond went up against Andrew Tate? And I say that with all sincerity. Andrew Tate is a human trafficker, a person that absolutely sold out all masculinity to go all in on toxicism, and this is a Bond movie that feels kind of steeped in early versions of that. Mark Forrester's already been on the show once with Stranger Than Fiction, which I liked a lot, but I also had really similar issues with how that movie approaches and treats women. You can tell there's this like Joss Whedon third wave feminism that goes along with these kinds of directors that want to play against the harder themes of the 80s and 90s where women are treated completely like objects, but it unobjectifies them by still making them victims and not giving them that personal grounding. And you could argue this movie gives that to Camille by the end. And again, like, these moves feel half-assed, especially when in the most recent Bond movie, they're actually willing to make it text in the movie that Bond feels he's too old to hit on young women. I also feel like the finale of this is kind of lackluster. It exits on a really, like, kind of note for me. It's a good thing this is a video review and not on Letterboxd, because I don't know how to add to Letterboxd. This is like a hungover needs a Viagra Bond movie, and that even has its own little charms, I think, if I think about it. Other little spots of charm. Jeffrey Wright and David Harbour showing up in the middle of this movie is really fun. This is full dad stash David Harbour too. I know people don't remember that he's in this movie because this is just before his career really took off, and the same for Jeffrey Wright, who's been around for a long time but really culturally cemented himself within the last 10 years. He also comes back in future Bond movies, which I really enjoy seeing the through line across these movies where they do try to keep as many characters around as they possibly can. I also want to go out of my way to call out the opening song on this one, Jack White and Alicia Keys together. This is a real banger intro. I think the visuals are really cool with all the sand and stuff. I just feel like this movie was missing some of the more shiny, neon, dripping with diamonds, fragrance commercial kind of feeling that we get from other Bond films. It's also kind of interesting that there's a running theme this year of action heroes being friend-zoned. We had The Dark Knight, Maggie Gyllenhaal's character Rachel is friend-zoning Batman. We have Camille in this one friend-zoning Bond by the end, basically being like, dog, go figure out your demons. In The Transporter 3, which is tomorrow's video, I know that he ends up not getting with the girl that he's transporting in that movie, which is a switch from the first film, and I think it's kind of cool to see this attempt to make our action stars grow up in 2008. I know the film rescue we do for this is kind of a downer, because at the time we were in the middle of like the COVID lockdown, if I remember, and just not having a great time with a slew of rough movies on Film Rescue. So I know we weren't especially nice to it. Coming back to it this time, I'm not as unpleased. I was actually really conscious to look at the shaky cam and make sure that it really is a small amount of the movie. You can tell it's used more to cover mistakes than it is as a crutch for the filmmaking. Especially the Rube Goldberg inventions of that opening sequence where Bond eventually gets tied upside down chasing his gun before you can grab a rope and swing up and shoot. Like, it's cool shit. They're definitely attempting to do cool shit here. I think the real accusation here is that it feels like it just gets locked in third gear. It never pushes all the way up to 5 because everything has to stay small and grounded. I think James Bond makes his way across a dozen boats in a certain sequence. That's just an insane amount of boats in one chase. He drives at least 3 of them, if I remember correctly. It seems like the creators here are fond of Bond in all ways, including some of the cringier, harsher stuff from the 90s, including some of the cooler feeling stuff from the 70s. They're trying to mishmash it all together, but also update Bond and keep the story brought up to a level that we're seeing across like the Bourne movies and things like that, where they want like updated gadget spy thriller, and then it never fully shifts back into first gear to allow us to just kind of sit with these characters. There's a constant go, 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 go. The action scenes just never quit for the first 45 minutes. The segment in Hades starts off with a knife fight, puts them into a bike car chase, lands them directly into the hub of the villains, which turns into a bike then boat chase. And as soon as all of that's done, hit the brakes, we're jumping to an opera scene that Mission Impossible is going to come through and do way better in a couple years. That's just a small example of how frenetic and pushing this movie is, and it sounds like the engine is just revving in third gear, never able to push into the next one. And maybe I wouldn't have any of these issues if the movie wasn't so self-serious. Some of the future movies end up having a little more fun along with these characters, allowing a couple more jokes to breathe. James Bond is a funny guy, after all. He's supposed to be charming and charismatic, and part of that is being funny. It's not being sexy all the time. You can't be too cool, you freeze. I feel like that's the going thing for this era, just characters trying to be written as cool as possible and never being warmed up to the audience. So at least by the time we get to Transporter 3 tomorrow, we'll be ready for a movie that accepts its internal silliness. I know he pops his car up onto 2 wheels and drives between 2 trucks at some point in that movie. I remember that vividly from seeing it in the theaters, so I'm excited to visit in on that one tomorrow. Check out my Blue Sky and my Instagram for stories and updates. You're probably watching on TikTok or YouTube, so go ahead and give me a follow if you watch this deep into the video. And go check out my Patreon where you can help support me on my way to South Korea. I'll send you one of the ticket stubs from this series, and we can have a blast together. That's it for this video. I will see you tomorrow.